Go ahead and go. So thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time and joining us for a conversation around how to build a killer business at value prop. I want to kind of just start by quickly introducing myself. My name is Jamal Malik. I am the managing partner and founder of Sales Advantage. A little bit about me real quick. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years now, but I actually have a finance background myself. I started off with doing enterprise architecture and long-term strategy and planning for government entities, and then made my way into the commercial space. And I helped a lot of pharmaceutical and other health and life sciences companies build buying processes for a long time. But most notably, the last 10 years before I started Sales Advantage, I was at Microsoft in a number of different sales and marketing roles. And my focus was primarily around value selling. I actually was part of the server and tools business when they launched Azure. And I was part of a center of excellence, which basically had to figure out how Microsoft was going to pivot from selling on-prem products to cloud products to business decision makers, because we knew that the spend was going to go directly to them in the future as it pertains to more and more strategic investments and even IT budgets. I was part of a team that led several culture change programs for Microsoft globally. I built their actually value selling process called MSP, and I also built the Microsoft concession process, which focused on helping Microsoft drive adoption and usage of the product they sold to their customers. 3 years ago, I left Microsoft, and I actually, as I mentioned, I started Sales Advantage. And our mission as a company is to help propel B2B SaaS companies forward by amplifying differentiation and positioning them as trusted advisors to business decision makers. Again, as I mentioned, this is something that I have a ton of passion around because, again, every tech company is out there is trying to make this pivot. They have the expertise in technology, but they know they need to engage and basically build credibility with business decision makers if they can try to influence the spend from a strategic perspective for their customers. And as it pertains to getting new customers, but we'll touch on that here in a second. The way we actually execute on our mission is through building AI-assisted value propositions and hosting a number of automated digital marketing solutions. So for us, through leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence, we have basically streamlined the process of developing industry-aligned value propositions. Additionally, the outreach activities you kind of need to get in front of and get the time of a business decision maker. We're not going to go through that in this discussion, but just kind of wanted to share where our focus is. And then lastly, what we primarily try to drive with our customers is, again, how do you build rapid credibility with the business decision maker? How do you accelerate new customer acquisition? How do you expand reach into existing customers? And lastly, reducing churn and increasing the adoption of products. I'd love to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, if you want to stop me and ask a question, feel free to do so. Use a chat window if you like. You can raise your hand to be able to see that and respond accordingly. The next thing I want to talk about really quickly is just the agenda, what we're going to talk about before we talk about it. I want to take a second and just get very clear on who this is for. There's a number of roles across sales and marketing this is applicable to, but there's a core audience that I think this is probably the most specific to. I want to take a second and talk about some old approaches and some new principles around building value propositions so we can kind of have some juxtaposition between what most tech companies or we've seen traditionally tech companies do and then what needs to happen in the future to engage with BDMs. We'll talk about some concepts and formulas. And then lastly, as a part of this, we'll actually use a real case study, if you will, a customer example of effectively showing an example of the actual fully fleshed out, fully built value proposition. I am going to start off and just say there's a lot of deep content coming at you here. not to scare you or anything, but it is some pretty involved items. Again, if you want me to kind of stop and go deeper, I'm happy to do it. But we're going to talk about enterprise architecture. We're going to talk about business capability mapping. We're going to talk about value proposition structuring, benefits quantification, all the things I love. But basically how you can kind of piece those things together to build a value prop. Okay, so with that, as I mentioned, let's take a second to talk about who this is most useful for. So what we found is that product marketing managers and industry marketing managers get the most use out of this. The reason being is because, yes, sales people have to create value propositions and other marketing people have to do it too, but these two personas specifically are constantly having to rethink, reshape, update, or even develop new value propositions as new products are launched or developed or they're enhanced, okay? There's a few use cases that I just want to kind of point out really quickly beyond just kind of developing contact messaging, advertisements and building content for webinars and white papers. There'll be a whole other slew of applications we'll touch on the end that you can actually leverage to leverage this content around or build value proposition around. But those are typically the things that drive a need to constantly have to build value props. And then the other two personas I want to kind of touch on is customer success and sales. Interestingly, what we found is customer success teams spend just as much time trying to engage with BDMs than a marketing individual or even a salesperson, because those individuals, again, I mean, they may have already sold a product to a customer, but getting them to use it is a whole different ballgame. It's an interesting dynamic. And you may ask yourself, how could a customer buy something and then not use it? But without getting into a rat hole, let me just say it happens a lot. And the customer success teams, really their mission is to make sure that the customers are getting the most usage and obviously value out of the investment they made within a certain product platform. Okay. And obviously with sales, as I mentioned, this is an ongoing thing. Typically, you have much more specific information around a customer to build a value prop around, typically as part of the sales engagement, obviously. But aside from that, this is still applicable and useful both in terms of expressing the unique value proposition, but also identifying the outcomes that your customers are trying to drive. The next piece I'll just touch on really quickly is the focus around how value propositions have traditionally been made and what we suggest value propositions be shaped going forward in the future, especially as it relates to engaging with BDM. So a lot of times what you'll see a lot of tech-focused companies do, right, is focus on the use of technology, right? And the fact that using it is essentially about automating tasks. And therefore, this becomes a technical issue. So you'll see value props around, okay, it's about automation and we got to figure out that specific piece. And this is how this technology can fix that problem, okay? The other piece that we also see a pattern around technology-based companies building value props is that a lot of the value propositions focus around the cost of implementing technology should be justified by a direct effect on the financial bottom line. And we actually disagree with that. We'll talk about more here in just a second, but you'll see over and over again, this will help you save cost. This will help you, reduce spend and things like that. That typically is the primary outcome we're trying to drive, but that's not the only one that we'll talk about. And then lastly, what you'll see sometimes is that the functionality provided by technology is a benefit within itself. And you see that all the time. This product can handle 500,000 transactions per second. It has the ability to, has this much space available to it. So you'll focus on the features and functions within the value prop itself. What we recommend when actually building a value prop is to focus on these three principles instead. Okay, so the first piece is that look to specifically address a business goal or a unique operational need. Okay, now there's two elements to this. There's the part of the strategic alignment you need to provide or create as part of the value prop to the customer's business goals, but then also at an operational level, what they're actually doing. We'll talk about that more here in just a second as well. The second piece I'll talk about is the fact that the principles around leverage technology creates business value, which can be observable, measurable, quantifiable, or financial. Okay, not all outcomes have to be financial in nature. We'll dig really, really deep on this here in just a second. The last piece I'll talk about is the fact that focusing on business change will assist the organization to develop or enhance capabilities. So we'll talk about this again more here in a second, but an organization must do one of three things to realize value or benefit. They must start doing something, stop doing something, or improve on doing something. No value can be created by not changing something. Okay, so those are the principles I want to kind of talk about really quickly, and then let's now get into actually the actual fundamental principles of building a value prop. Okay, so the first piece that we do when we start figuring out to create a value prop, we try to build a scope around where we're trying to actually apply the value prop towards. And here are the three things that I'll just kind of talk about real quickly that helps us make the most impactful business-led value proposition for your product or service. And those come in three lenses. You look at through the three lenses. Number one is select a geo. Now, you may ask yourself, well, value prop should be broad and it should affect everybody. But the truth is that heavily regulated industries can differ significantly, even within a specific area or between countries. And a good example of that you can look at is the financial services, or let's say healthcare, between, like, let's say even US and Canada. Healthcare between Canada and the US are completely different animals. Okay, so you can't go at with a customer in Canada or a customer in the US and bring the same value proposition because they have different goals, they have different investments, the different outcomes typically they're trying to provide. Okay. Additionally, if you look at places like Europe, okay, Europe has a lot of different countries in a very concentrated area, and the business maturity or the degrees of business maturity across those areas can vary pretty significantly as well. And so our recommendation is, number one, focus on a specific country, and we'll give you a good solid example of applying these principles here in just a second. The second piece, the second lens we look through is identifying the industry and sub-vertical that you want to go after. Okay. Now, as a high level, note, one of the things we we really try to harp on is to not use the Security Exchange Commission's standard industry classification system to identify industry segments. The reason being is because a lot of tech companies do, but you shouldn't, because that system was developed back in the 1920s, and it's actually very flat, and it's not robust enough to really capture what's going on in across industries and sub-industries today. What we recommend is using something called the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS for short. Now, this is something that was developed in 1996, and it was a collaborative effort between the Office of Management Budget in the US, Statistics Canada, and then the Census Bureau of Mexico. Okay. Now, the reason why this is a really great system to use when you're actually figuring out your industry and your sub-industry is because it's bifurcated. They have high-level industries, and then within high-level industry, they have many sub-industries. The reason why we specifically try to target a sub-industry is because, like, let's just take financial services, which we'll actually take a look at here more in a second. The sub-industries within financial services are so complex. There's so many, and you cannot assume that a value proposition that you have for financial services will fit within each sub-industry. Okay, they have typically different products, different customers, different operations. And again, we'll show you a specific example of financial services and why you want to go down to a specific sub-industry when you're building the value prop. The last piece we'll touch on is building an ideal customer profile. Okay, and this typically just consists of things like the number of employees, annual revenue, are they government, are they commercial, but at the very least, are they publicly traded or privately owned? Okay, so once we have the scope figured out, where we want to target, what industry we want to figure out, and the ideal customer profile, we can then effectively do some analysis, some initial analysis around what this landscape looks like. Now, we'll show you an example we did for a tech company, a fairly large tech company. They focus on automating business processes, digital process automation, and they wanted to focus on companies in the US publicly traded within financial services with revenues between 565 million and 1.4 billion dollars. Okay, so they're not going after the really big guys. This is kind of mostly mid-market. Okay, now what we found upon this initial analysis is that within this scope number of accounts, there were 24 individual sub-verticals within this scope, within financial services. And again, I know this might be kind of hard to read, but just to give you an example of what this consists of, there's investment management and fund operators, diversified financial services, investment banking, diversified lending, investment service and advice. And each one of these sub-industries are significantly different from one another. So again, what you'll see many tech companies do, even the largest ones, they'll say, hey, we have a financial services solution. And that becomes the single place where you lose a lot of BDMs in terms of your ability to connect and build credibility with them. Because the next question they're going to ask is, okay, which sub-industry are you specifically referring to? And again, credit rating agencies and investment banking institutions are completely different animals. They have different products, different customers, different operations. They can be very, very involved across all those. So again, that's one thing we suggest. You try to identify or just understand which one you're going to go after. To understand which specific sub-industry to focus on, what we had to look at is the amount of revenue that's being spent within the industry. Now, this has absolutely no impact on the the propensity of a customer to buy. All this tells us is how big is the pie. And on average, financial services institutions spend between 7 and 9% of their annual revenue on IT. And this is by far the largest spend out of any industry that you'll see is within financial services and IT. So this kind of gives us an idea of, okay, which one of these sub-industries do we really want to kind of hunker down and kind of focus on, okay? And in this example, out of the $321 billion that these accounts represent, 68 billion comes from investment management and fund operators, and then 35 billion comes from investment banking. So cumulatively, about a third of that revenue. Okay? What we then do is we try to make a delineation around which specific sub-industry do we really want to focus in on. Okay, and in this example, we're going to focus on investment banking for a number of different reasons, but primarily because it's very straightforward. We know that we have access to their annual reports, the 10Ks, the strategic information. And what we then recommend is to pick at least 5 accounts to do a very deep dive around what the business strategy are of these accounts. Now, you can do this manually, okay? It's gonna take a while. However, you absolutely could. We leverage a machine learning solution to automate a lot of this and streamline it, but the information is there, okay? And I'll talk about where you can get it here in a second, but before I do, let's talk about some key and core concepts, okay? As you start looking at the business strategy of these accounts to understand really what's going on, right, to build your value propositions, let's just kind of talk about what you're looking for, okay? So there's 5 core elements that every single business is going to have. And you can decompose a business strategy of an organization around, okay? So the first one is what we refer to as a business driver or a business goal. Okay, it's basically a statement of the current opportunities and issues facing an organization. Okay, every organization has a business goal. The second piece is the investment objective. Now, this is really key because every organization makes investments to achieve their goals. And you also need to understand what the objective of those investments are. One of the things that we really like to call out is that every single value prop needs to tie into an investment objective for 2 reasons. Number 1, to drive strategic alignment, but number 2, that's also where the organization has budget. Okay, they will actually absolutely tell you where they're allocating funds to achieve their goals, and all this information is available for you. The last couple I just going to touch on are the outcomes or the benefits, and that's simply an advantage on behalf of an individual or group of individuals. I'll talk more about more deeply on those here in the next few slides. I already mentioned the business change. So what are the campaigns that they're running to achieve these outcomes? And then lastly, what are the projects? Again, all of this information is available in a lot of public-facing documentation that's produced by a publicly traded company. The last piece I'll just touch on is the benefit owner, which effectively is the individual that is going to own either the outcome or the operational deliverable. This is the person you're building the value proposition for, okay? Now, as I mentioned, where do you find this information? These are in annual reports and 10Ks, 10Qs, quarterly financial reports. All of this is available on the SEC. You can go to investor presentations, shareholder letters, and then lastly, even CXO discussions. You can ask your customers what their priorities are, and they're more than happy to share what they're focused on instead of just showing up and be like, hey, this is what we can kind of do for you. Okay? Now that we have gone through these topics or these concepts, let me show you an example of an analysis that was performed for one of those 5 accounts that I mentioned. You'll want to understand what's going on within these accounts so you can develop your value proposition, okay? So this is Evercore, they're an investment banking organization in New York. Let's just look at their business strategy real quick. I'm not gonna bottom all this out, but this gives you an idea of the kind of insights that are required to build a really, really strong value proposition. Again, it comes with how well do you know your customers, okay? The first piece here is the business driver. You actually read this from right to left. And for them, it's to help their clients meet the strategic and financial objectives and thus become the most respected independent investment banking advisory firm in the world, both in quality and in scale. That's their goal. Okay, great. The next piece we'll talk about are the investments they're making to achieve their goal. You can see they're spread across 3 elements. Now, I'm going to paraphrase some of this just to kind of go a little bit faster, but effectively, investment banking organizations heavily invest in people. Their investment bankers are their most prized possessions. And over here, you can see they're investing heavily where they're looking to, we are deeply committed to develop long-term trusted relationships with our clients and helping our clients achieve superior strategic and financial results, okay? The second piece around people is we maintain an unwavering commitment to our core values in attracting, developing, and training, and mentoring, promoting a diverse team of the most talented professionals in order to build a truly self-sustaining firm. We'll talk more about here in just a second, but one of the things I just really want to call out is, as I mentioned earlier, the people of an investment banking organization are absolutely core to its success. So they're always recruiting, they're always hiring, they're always developing, they're always promoting. And we'll talk about that here in a second. And then the shareholders, we really focus on growth in revenues and operating earnings over the long term, returning a significant portion of our earnings to our shareholders with a responsible governance framework. So this is about being operationally efficient, effective, and financially, budgetary conscious. Okay. The rest of these I'll just touch on really quickly. As an outcome, all of these investments need to help grow market share, improve flexibility of operations, improve service quality, broaden the geographic footprint, and diversifying revenues. Okay, so all of these outcomes are tied back to the investments that they're making, and these value props also need to tie back to helping drive these specific benefits. The last piece I've covered here is the business changes. Now, I mentioned the business changes are the campaigns that they're running. Now, what we do here when we do this analysis is we try to find at least 5 different accounts where we can have this type of insights, and then we look for patterns. And so for Evercore, what they're focusing on to have things around COVID and revenue recovery, but typically to grow their investment banking business, grow and diversify their business, further enhance the profile and competitive position, achieve organic growth and improve profitability, add and promote highly qualified investment banking professionals, developing internal talent, improving productivity, right? Things of that nature. So you can kind of see what are the big rocks that are going on within this environment. And again, we'll show how you can use these to kind of build your value prop. And tie it back to product or solution that you're trying to position to your customer. The last piece I'll just kind of share is enabling changes. So these are the projects that are going on. I'm not going to bottom all these out, but there's an element in here around then placing your technology at the very left of this, whatever product or service you're trying to sell, and you're mapping it effectively to the project. This is called business capability mapping. And what this allows us to do is then connect your product, your technology to the business strategy of an organization and trace it back all the way to the business goal, hence helping you build your value proposition. Now, we're not there yet, but as I mentioned, we do this 5 different times, okay? And the purpose of this is because we're looking for patterns. And what we know is if we do this and we find these patterns in the same geo, in the same sub-industry, within the same scope, you can make an educated guess that other accounts also have the same exact problem, okay, or they have these same exact goals. Okay, I know I covered a lot, but let me kind of take a second and just kind of, if you have any questions, let me know. But basically, share the formula in building the value prop. Now, you'll actually see this, a real example of this here in a second. But let me kind of just walk through this and kind of talk about how it kind of fits together. Because we take the time to identify each individual's account's business strategy, we decompose all the different elements. What you're able to then do is take those elements, those matching patterns we build an aggregated business value map, and then plug it in to this formula. Okay, and the formula goes like this. First, you want to define the business driver and the investment objective. You want to state your solution, how you're going to help achieve those goals. Then you want to talk about the benefits. You want to structure those benefits, right, and help determine the explicit value of each benefit. Okay. Now, if this looks like a business case, it's because that's exactly what it is. We take the business case approach, the standard business case approach, and we shorten it. We remove certain levels. I'll talk about what those are in a second. And that helps you with the beginning of a business case. At the end of the day, what we're doing is building a very light business case in as succinct as possible so that a business decision maker can see that, identify it very quickly, understand it aligns with their priorities, and then hopefully take action on it. Okay. I won't go through the principles. We talked about those already. I do want to take a second and just talk about structuring benefits, just because we've been talking a lot about it, and I just want to make sure that that we are able to be very explicit around what are the outcomes, what outcomes organizations care about, and what the differences are between. So as I mentioned earlier, not every outcome has to be financial in nature. Okay, there are 4 types of outcomes that typically an organization is trying to achieve or is willing to invest in to drive as an outcome. Okay, and as I mentioned, there's observable, measurable, quantifiable, and financial. Let's talk about what those are real quickly and how they differ. An observable benefit is effectively your customer is able to visually see an improvement or advantage for themselves or on behalf of their team. Okay, as an example, I can see my team collaborating more. Okay, great. That is an observable outcome that they're willing to invest in. Great. A measurable outcome is saying we have a baseline and we will be able to measure the improvement, however, not be able to predict the exact extent of that outcome. So, hey, my team connects and collaborates, through 10 times per week. Okay, we have a baseline. Now, through this solution, we think we can increase that collaboration, but we're not exactly sure how much. But we have a pretty good idea that it will help promote. So that gives you an idea of, okay, we have a baseline, we can kind of, we know that we're going to improve, and by this pilot, maybe we'll be able to kind of quantify that more specifically, and then that'll help us broaden this project out or pilot out later. The next piece is quantifiable, which is not only do you have a baseline, but you can predict specifically how much it'll improve. So the value prop goes, we can help you increase collaboration in your organization, and we think it's going to improve by 100%. Okay, so we go from 10 to 20 times per week. Okay, that's a quantifiable outcome. And then lastly is financial. Now, one thing I'll talk about financial is that not every financial outcome, not every benefit has to have a financial outcome. And sometimes a lot of companies try to push towards a financial outcome, and that is absolutely not necessary. If it does, great. But if you try to force it unnaturally, it can actually hurt you more than it can help you. So in this example that was about collaboration, let's say that, hey, through this solution, we can help your team increase collaboration by 100%. And that helps to reach more customers and accelerate sales. And that results in, an increase in revenue of like, say, 10%. Just kind of make that up. Just give you an idea of like what that value proposition statement would look like. Okay. Now, do you have to go that deep for the value prop at the very top, at the very beginning? You do not. However, when you get to a sale, it's good to have this structure, because what it does is it gives you the ability to add on to that value prop and then build a business case like that. And the last thing I'll just kind of quickly say just about this approach is that depending on where you are along these benefits, the more money you can ask for. Okay, so for example, if you're only talking about observable benefits, what you can ask your customers in terms of spend is not going to be as high as measurable, quantifiable, or financial. The more you go higher in the ladder, the more you can justify asking in terms of spend from the customer. Does that make sense? Okay. The last piece I'll just talk about, as I mentioned, is if all this looks familiar, it looks like a business case, is because it absolutely is built around that concept. But all we're going to do is focus on these first 4 points. So the driver for change giving rise to an investment objective, and this solution will provide X amount of benefit. Okay, and once you have that initial value prop, sales can then go in and figure out the cost, figure out the investment risk, the specific explicitity of each benefit, and that's how you kind of build your business case. But again, this is kind of showing how marketing and sales should or can work together in building a value. Okay, I know we covered a lot, but I want to take a second and share an actual value proposition that we developed, for one of our accounts for financial services. This is based off of the financial services market analysis that was done for investment banking. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because we do a deep dive on every single account and we know explicitly what's going on against their goals, their investments, we can then identify patterns. Okay, and then what we do from there is we identify themes. And what we found is the following 3 themes for the investment banking organizations. And I mentioned also that our customer, they focus on digital process automation. That's what their solutions typically kind of consist of. And so I'm just going to walk through this really quickly and kind of show how the value drivers all kind of work together and then who you're kind of selling to. So the first theme we found for investment banking is that developing internal talent and hiring high caliber professionals while cultivating a welcoming, trusting, and empowered workplace environment. That is the theme that we identified for these organizations. Now, the pain here is that developing long-term trusted relationships with clients and helping them achieve superior strategic and financial results is predicated on these institutions to be able to attract, develop, train, and mentor and promote a team of most talented professionals and maintain an intellectually stimulating, fair, and fun place to work. Competition for these professionals is fierce, coupled with the need to quickly ramp and train teams, transition to new roles and across various business lines. That's both the pain and even the opportunity. The value driver here for our customer around these themes, these pain points, is eliminate long onboarding times by connecting fragmented, siloed systems across middle and back offices, create a single digital system of employee engagement with end-to-end visibility for clients and advisors with real-time audit trail. With the solution, investment banking firms can decrease costs as well as onboarding times, ensuring advisors reach full productivity faster. And it doesn't stop there. The solution supports every advisor through their life cycle so you can be sure they're empowered to do their best work. Okay, that's the value driver. That's what this organization can talk to the head of HR and build into an advertisement, into a white paper, into what have you. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these just because for the sake of time, but the other 2 themes actually also help build the differentiation for this account for this sub-industry. So another theme we found was that creating opportunities through acquisitions and creating new proprietary solutions while building a differentiated data and diverse portfolio of industry product and geographical expertise. The pain point here, again, is that they're constantly looking ways to meet evolving client goals and build strong partnerships by delivering superior client services through a globally diversified business. Again, I'm not going to go through all this, but our customer has a knowledge management solution. They have other elements that kind of help them build new solutions. We would take this to the VP of New Ventures. And then last piece is workforce optimization and productivity while enhancing collaboration among businesses to deepen and expand client relationships. It's another theme that we found. And again, we talked about the pain points and then the value driver that this specific account has for investment banking organizations within the sub-industry. And the COO will be the person we want to kind of talk about that. So we do this work because, again, you want to understand the theme, you understand the pain point, you build the value driver, but then it also helps you put together this single statement for investment banking institutions for that customer. Okay, so here, this account is the only vendor that provides investment banking institutions the ability to develop internal talent and accelerate the hiring of high-caliber professionals, create new proprietary solutions, and drive workforce optimization efforts while improving productivity and collaboration through a single platform. Okay, that is their unique value proposition to investment banking firms within the U.S. Okay, that becomes the way in which these other this specific client can then go drive marketing activities, again, do the ads, point it to a specific account, right? And what's so amazing about this is that all of this comes from your customers, like insights from the accounts that were actually analyzed, okay? None of this is like made up. It's all based off of the actual individual research and the priorities that they've already kind of telling you. Okay, so again, what's really powerful about this is when you actually build it or you bring it to your customer account, they can it only resonates with them, but it's all about language. They see their priorities and they're able to take action on that. Okay, the last few things I just want to touch on is the applications for this type of content. Okay. So customer journey mapping, sales playbooks, white papers, webinars, ABM campaigns, BDR scripts. This is all stuff that helps this insight kind of feed into, okay? And the last piece I'll just talk about is just in conclusion, when we put this all together, what are some of the things that you want to kind of keep top of mind? So again, when you're building a value proposition, do it by sub-industry, by sub-vertical, and always identify the persona that you're kind of going after. Okay, don't assume a single value prop is effective for an entire industry. Okay, that's not a good assumption to make. And then lastly, just remember, the customer does not care about your product. They only care about their outcomes, right? Through this approach to being as fine as possible, you can help accelerate new customer acquisition, expand reach within existing customers, as we mentioned, reduce churn, accelerate product adoption, and also build rapid credibility with business decision makers. What you'll find is if you use this content as part of your digital marketing solutions, it'll help improve click-through rates, improve customer engagement, and overall also kind of reduce your marketing spend. Okay. We've got one last slide here just before we close, but I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to connect and kind of walk through this. Happy to stay on, answer any questions you may have. But if you'd like to hang out, I'm happy to do so. We'll send a quick survey to those that attended. I really appreciate you guys doing it. If you do it, you'll be entered in a drawing for a Starbucks gift card. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much again. Happy hunting, and happy to stay around and answer additional questions that you may have.